For the next Jamboard, first, just a heads up on this page that there's 3 ways to write numbers between 0 and 1. Maybe more if they're money. But I could take a quarter and write it as a fraction, a decimal, or a percent. I could take a half and write it as a fraction, a decimal, or a percent. And for some things like money, quarters and 50-cent pieces, we sort of know which one, right? Quarters are 0.25, 50-cent pieces are 0.5, because we've seen it a lot. But for other numbers, it's a little trickier. So I did one example. Now let's do another one. So first, somebody who's here, April or Haley or Cody, tell me what we're starting in. Are we starting in a fraction or percent or decimal? Doesn't matter, just pick one.
Percent.
Percent, okay. And what percent do you want to start with? You could even make it yourself if you want. Use the text box and you can just type in something like, you know, whatever, 14% or something. Or you could tell me and I'll write it, whatever you want. %31%. Great. I'm going to make it bigger so we can see it better. Okay. So how do I change this to the other formats? Percent means out of 100. 31% means 31 out of 100. And can I write that as a fraction? Sure, 31 out of 100. So all I have to do is take away the percent symbol and replace it by fraction bar 100, because they both mean out of 100. How about percent to decimal? We just saw that with our rip-flop. Right into percent, left out of percent with 2 swoops. So if I want to go out of percent, that's left. There was a decimal hiding on the right side of a whole number. Now it's moving over here. So I'm going to get 0.31. So that was left out of percent. I could also have gone down from fraction. 31 divided by 100. 31 divided by 100 gives me 0.31. Fraction bars are just a division symbol waiting to happen. So divide to go from fraction to decimal. If I wanted to go up this way, I could say 0.31 is like the casual name for this. Its formal name is 31 somethings, tenths, hundredths. The smallest is hundredths. So 31 hundredths. So I just say that, 31 hundredths. Whenever you say the formal name of the decimal, you turn it into a fraction. And if I started with a decimal, then the opposite from the left out of percent would be right twice into percent. Okay, that was one where we started with percent. Let's do another. Oops. I'm gonna steal you here. Let's do another where we start somewhere other than percent. So somebody just make up any number between 0 and 1, or type it yourself. And let's see where we're getting started. Well, that is another percent, but I can do it that way. Let's go the other direction around. So let's go into our left out of percent first. So I start where there's a hidden decimal point next to 12, like I have $12 and no change. Go left twice, because it's always twice, and I get 0.12. If I say the formal name of 0.12, how do I say it out loud? It's 12 what? Well, let's label it together. What was the name of that place value? You can type it in chat if you're eating. I see April. I don't want to disturb your dinner. I know it is dinner time.
Was it the 10th?
It is the tenths. And the next one is hundredths. So we have 12, and then the smallest place value we used, hundredths. So when I say 12 hundredths, I can just write that, 12 hundredths. If I was going this way, I would just take the percent sign off, have the 12, and replace the percent symbol with the over 100, because they both mean out of 100. Backing up a slide, notice that there's no red arrow in one part. Why not? There is a way to go directly from fraction to percent, but it is bulky and slow and unwieldy. It is so easy, especially like on the GED when you're allowed to use a calculator almost all the time, to just do the division, get the decimal, and then scoot it twice, bonk, bonk, and then you're done. So if you want to go from fraction to percent, don't do it directly, take 2 steps. It will still be much faster. Okay, here is your homeworky one. Let's practice with all the kitchen fractions. So take all of the things that measuring cups tend to be, and can you write them also as decimals and also as percents? The one is sort of a trick question. Let's talk about that one before we move on. How would you write 1 as a decimal? You can type it in chat if you we talked about this with bigger numbers and scoops. If I had 34.8 and I wanted to do 2 scoots to the right, what did I do? No, okay, I will remind you. We put zeros here. You're allowed to fill in empty spaces with zeros. You're also allowed to write a decimal point next to a whole number, like 34 is the same as 34.00. That they both mean I have $34 and no change. So if I wanted, I could write a 1 like that. That still counts as decimal format. Or I could put a decimal point there with 1 0 or more zeros. It doesn't really matter if I put the zeros on or not. It just means I have a dollar bill and no change. So it's up to you. You could do that several different ways. Just leave it like that. Or make it a decimal if you want. What is the percent format for if you have the whole amount? How many out of 100 do you have? We can also think about it with the RIPLOP. If we went right into percent, what would happen? Somebody guess, how many percent do we have? Maybe Haley or Cody, because April's having her dinner.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, sure. 2 scoots to the right is going to make this number look not like 1, but 100. So 100% would be that whole grid, that whole hundreds frame filled in. Let me pause for a moment. So it would be how much of the whole is filled in? 100%, all 100 pieces. Oops, make it look like that. Are filled in. Okay, I think we should do the whole table together. So the first row, if I have the whole thing, the whole grid as a decimal, that's 1. I could write it as 1 and nothing else. Doesn't matter if I put the no change in my pocket. And how much is shaded? 100%. Now let's clear the grid and do the 1/2. How do I change a fraction to a decimal? I'm just going to divide it. So someone on their calculator do 1 divided by 2.
.5.
Yeah. And then when I scoot that twice, I have my 5/10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How many out of 100 are covered up?
Half of it.
Half of it. So half of 100, 50. Is that making sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm going to clear the grid again so I can draw on it for the next one. A third. This one is going to look a little trickier, but we can handle it. If you do 1 divided by 3 on the calculator, what do you get?
But 0.0 or 0.4, 3.
Let's keep the 2 of the 3s. So when we do this on our calculator, it's going to have 3s that keep going forever and ever. So we're going to round it. We talked at the very beginning of class about how division often makes a silly amount of digits. And we like having 2 decimal places, tenths and hundredths, because that fits our hundredths grid. And that fits the whole concept of percent, how much out of 100. So we're going to keep the tenths and the hundredths and get rid of the others. So I'm putting the word about. If you don't like the word about, because that seems sort of sloppy, then the math symbol for it is this squiggly equals. Have you seen that also? So that means we rounded. In this step, we rounded. Now we had a 3 that kept going. Is this 3 5 or more? Does it make us round up the 3 that we kept? No, this is a small thing, so we didn't have to round up. So it's not 0.34, it's just 0.33. So there we go, decimal about 0.33. When I'm saying this squiggly equals out loud, I will also say about, because that's what it means. If I want to riplop this, I'm going to shade in 33. So, whoops, there we go. So 10, 20, and 3 more. So what percent is that going to be? Oh, I shaded wrong. Oh, I'm sorry, brain dead. There is my 3/10 and 3 more.
33.
33%. Okay, 1/4 we saw on the other page. What is 1 divided by 4?
25.
Yeah, $0.25 is 0.25.
I'm going up on a walk with Bill.
Okay, you could write the 0 in front or not, doesn't really matter. If I rip lop it twice, how much out of 100 am I shading in? Right twice. So 20 and 5. 25 out of 100. Before we do the last two, any questions about those rows? Is the top row, that's sort of a trick question, making more sense now that you've seen the other rows? Okay, 1/6. Tell me what 1 divided by 6 is. This one is also one that we're going to round. It's about something.
One divided by 6?
Yeah,
6.
that's
Or-
6 divided by 1, other way around. Down the
One.
direction, not up.
One. And we're saying it wrong.
Just tell me what the calculator shows you and I'll talk about how we should round it.
Mhm. 0.16666666666.
Yeah, these 6s go on forever after. So I want to keep 2 of them. I'm going to get rid of these. Does the 6 that's next to the one I'm keeping make the one I'm keeping go up? Yes, it's 5 or more. So instead of rounding it to 0.16, I'm going to change that to be 0.17 because I got rid of a 6 next to it. What's the percent going to be?
Seventeen percent.
Perfect. You got it. You can either do the riplop twice, or you could just look at that and say this is 1/10. So on the grid, there's my 1/10 and 7 little hundredth squares. And there's 17 out of 100 total. The last one. This one is also going to be rounding, even though it's not one of these repeat forever decimals. So what do I get with 1 divided by 8?
0.125.
Yeah. I could keep it like that. I mean, it's not a crazy number of decimal places. If I wanted to round it, would it round to 0.12 or 0.13?
What'd you just say?
If I was to round it, would the fact that I'm getting rid of a 5 change it to 0.12 or 0.13?
Three?
3. The 5 is 5 or more, so it makes the thing that I'm
Mhm.
keeping go up 1. So you could make this be 0.13, and then that would turn into 13%. Let's say you wanted to be precise. You really spent a lot of time carefully measuring that you had an eighth of something, and you didn't want to round it. Then that's okay. We can just keep going. If I do my RipLop, then my decimal point ends up between the 2 and the 5, right? So I can just write that. I can keep the decimal point in between the 2 and the 5. What does that look like in my grid up above? That would mean I measure, and I'm going to do it darker this time. I have 12 of these things. Everyone okay with the 12 part? 12 out of 100. And then I have half a little box more. I have 0.5 of one of these little boxes. So I can't shade that in very well. My artwork is limited. But imagine I've shaded in all 12 of these boxes, and then I shade in just half of the 13th box. And there's nothing wrong with having a number that is a decimal inside of percent format. That just means that how many out of 100 are there? 12 and a half out of 100. Or you could just, again, round it and say 13 is good enough for this class. It's very rare in real life you would care. If you gained weight in the pandemic, does the doctor care if you went up 12.5% or 13%? No. If I am having a change in my gas mileage from week to week, is my car breaking down if one week it's 12.5 and the other week it's 13? No. Right? If I got a raise, I might care about that extra 0.5%, but a lot of things just won't care. Okay, now we're going to keep going, but it's easier because I have all the answers on the side. You just have to grab them with your mouse or finger if you're on the phone and put them in the right boxes. So Haley and Cody and April talk together, grab all the stuff over here and try putting it in the boxes. Remember that to go from fraction to decimal, all you're doing is division, and you can use your calculator. And to go from decimal to percent, all you're doing is RipLop. You can even jump from percent all the way to fraction just by replacing the percent symbol with over 100. So far, it's exemplary. You're doing perfect work. Yay. Wonderful. I want to add just a couple little comments before asking if you have questions. First of all, some of these are simplified fractions that you wouldn't have to write that way. If you took 75% and wrote that as 75 out of 100, that would be perfectly fine for our math class. Later on, someone might say, that's not a good enough answer. You need to reduce it to 3/4. But for us, that's great. So if any of these you were thinking, where is the fraction like that, then that's okay. 40 over 100 would have been a great answer there too. Similarly, you can write more zeros to the right of decimal numbers. So if I wanted to write this as 0.40 or 0.30, you can. There's nothing wrong with writing it that way. You don't need to, it's optional, but you can. Similarly, if it helped you to put a 0 here to do the riplop, then you can write that 0 there. Okay, any other comments or questions from people? As a side note, you did this pretty quickly. This page, we had that really long pause when people were confused with the trick question of what 1 is. So if there's an awkwardly long pause, just say, I'm confused, and your teacher will figure something out. If you don't, then we're all on kind of waiting for you to do something, because I don't know if you're confused or if you have to change a diaper or if you're having lunch or if the doorbell rang or what happens. So if you're confused, just say you're confused. That's not a problem. Okay, and here is what I just commented about for the people that were looking at this on their own. We haven't talked about how 30 out of 100, 30 little boxes one at a time, is the same as 3/10, 3 of these up and down columns. But they are, and people will sometimes ask you to reduce fractions, make them have smaller numbers instead of bigger numbers inside them. You don't have to do that, but maybe you've heard of that rule. So the question to think about is, why do you think that rule exists? Is there anything wrong with 30 out of 100? Is there any time in real life where you saw a fraction that had bigger numbers in it and you wished that they were smaller numbers? Maybe that rule is just an out-of-date rule, because with calculators and computers, this isn't any harder to do. I can certainly put 30 out of 100 in my calculator, very easy. Or maybe it's still an important rule, and there's some reason that this is a friendlier or nicer fraction than that one to use. So think about that over the weekend.